So, welcome to an English edition of my podcast, The World in the Pocket. And I'm, as always, your host, Gabi Henze. And today I meet Donald Fisher. Hi, Donald.
Hello, Gabby.
So, you're just back from a world trip, if I may say so, for nearly 3 years. So, in summer 2023, you decided with your family to pack everything up in the UK and travel only with hand luggage as your Instagram account says, a bit of the world. So your destination was clear, I think. Yeah, you wanted to go to New Zealand, right?
Yes, the target was always going to be New Zealand. We kind of had a look at our lives and where we all were in terms of a family, and the girls were at an age where if we were going to travel and we were going to look at New Zealand as a possible alternative life for us,
Hmm.
uh, now was the moment. So my eldest was just finishing year six, and my youngest was halfway through primary, but that was kind of the benchmark. And Yeah, so we decided, yeah, let's go.
Okay, so you are originally from New Zealand, so the
Yes,
destination is therefore clear, but you just didn't fly over to New Zealand, but you traveled before. So why did
absolutely.
you
So
decide this?
yes, so we took the opportunity to exploit the gap between the academic year in the UK and the academic year in New Zealand or Australasia. So the academic year obviously finishes in August and starts kind of September in the UK, but in New Zealand it starts sort of at the end of January, sort of to mid-January there. So we
Mhm.
decided to exploit that gap, and take 10 or so weeks to travel down through Southeast Asia on our way to New Zealand.
Mhm.
And then have a month or two left over to get set up and the girls all ready for school for the new academic year in New Zealand, which say starts in mid to late January.
Yeah. So where have you been in Southeast Asia?
So our first trip, we flew directly into Bangkok, so into Thailand. Then we went Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, then back into Thailand again. So we sort of did a loop, and then we hit Sumatra, and then Lombok, and then before we headed out, we were going to go to Bali, but we changed our minds and went to a tiny little island, sort of very, very close to both Lombok and Bali, called Gili Meno. There's
Hmm.
the little chain of three islands there: Gili T, Gili Air, and Gili Meno. But Gili Meno is the tiny, tiny little one, and yeah, so we picked that as our final destination, and then hopped to Bali, and then flew straight to New Zealand from there.
Okay. Was it difficult to prepare these trips? Did it take a long time, or did you spontaneously decided where to go?
Absolutely spontaneously.
Wow.
So we had the two fixed points. So we bought our flight from London into Bangkok, and
Hmm.
then we bought our flight from Bali into Auckland, New Zealand,
Yeah.
and then everything else in the middle we was literally spur of the moment. Just open up a map, open up a guidebook, whatever, and just have a look and do a little bit of research, and combined with a little bit of, oh, that looks interesting, and then just go. Absolutely.
Cool. Uh, how did your daughters and your wife obviously liked, but especially the kids liked the idea from the beginning? Were they, oh yeah, let's travel? Or were they a bit like, not sure? What, how was
It
it?
was it was a bit of both. So
Okay.
for them, it's a very, very much the unknown, that kind of traveling. They have done a sort of travel in and around Europe. So Greece is a big favorite. They'd recently had a holiday to Cyprus, which they absolutely loved. So it's not exactly that they weren't daunted by the idea of traveling. It's something that they've done before, but those are obviously more holiday kind of travels, whereas this was very much traveling. I Something I've been reflecting on, actually, that a lot of people think that, when you're doing something like this, it's a great big holiday. And I suppose it can be, maybe, if you put a huge amount of effort into planning, your entire itinerary from start to finish, then
Mm,
maybe it is. But um, if you're doing it on the go, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of planning, um, and as I say, you're traveling quite hard, and it can be tiring, and it's quite interesting. One of the things we discovered is you really need to actually build in downtime during your travels, in order to sort of recoup and recover and rest, because it can get very, very tiring traveling
mm,
like that. But the girls, as I say, to come back to your original question, they were both excited and a little bit tremulous about it.
mhm.
Um, but I think probably more excited than anything else. They didn't really know what to expect, I don't think. So, and they're both fairly resilient, sort of, kind of kids, and that they very much bend and sway with what's going on. And so from that point of view, they were absolutely fabulous. They just took it all in their stride.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, but obviously, when you packed everything up, rented the house out, and then they had only their little luggage, and that was it. Yeah, it was
Oh,
probably
yes,
a
yes. I,
bit
I remember the nightmare about, which teddy and which toy, has to
very
come.
important.
So Ted and Mister Impossible. I remember, and actually they've come back with us as well. They've made the whole trip with us as well. Yeah. But no, deciding and again, that's a very big, because we'd been in London for, almost, 24, 25 years or so, and the life that you have in and around you is quite incredible. So when you're packing away your life, and everything in your life, you need to pick up and go, right, is this staying here in the shed, is it going to the charity shop, is it coming with us to New Zealand, the amount of, sort of time and effort and emotion that goes into just doing that process alone, is surprising,
Mhm,
and often bordered on the overwhelming, to be honest. Yeah.
mhm, mhm.
But the kids were fine. I think that was more of a problem for Kirsten and I, my wife. That they just kind of, just sort of just watched the watched the riot.
Okay. On the traveling, uh, did the daughters gave some impact and said, "Oh, stop here. Daddy, mommy, here we want to do some beach, I don't know, surfing, holidays, or oh no, that's not the place, let's go. We want to do this and this."
There was some input, simply because we were planning where we were going next, etc., on the fly. So we certainly, had some targets that we wanted to hit along the way. It wasn't, completely random. So, for example, we really knew that we wanted to do a lot of the temples in Cambodia, for example. Especially, like the one which is being taken over by the forest completely. I think they used that for the filming of the Tomb Raider films, for example,
Ah,
in
yeah.
Angkor Wat, and all those. So we
Yeah.
wanted to do that. There were a couple of destinations that we really wanted to. So my eldest daughter and I are both qualified scuba divers. So there
Mm,
was some diving spots that we really wanted to hit, and that actually informed our very last place, Gili Menos, simply because the diving there is just spectacular. And certainly, especially when it got to the bits that, we could see we were getting tired and frustrated, and things were just a little bit ragged. We'd very much sit down and say, so, girls, what do you fancy? Do we want to do some beach time? Do we, and we'd kind of involve them with it as well. So,
mhm,
given that they obviously didn't have a huge wealth of experience to draw on, but certainly when we were planning a lot of the downtime, sort of we certainly check in, what is it that they might like? Do they want to go to an island and a beach, or, do they
mhm.
want countryside or mountains, or, that
Yeah.
sort of thing? So to a limited extent, certainly they were involved.
Mhm. And you stayed mainly in hostels or flats or
a bit of a mix, mainly budget accommodation.
Hmm.
Very budget accommodation, and it was quite interesting. And yeah, certainly, as I say, the malleability of the girls in particular was quite phenomenal. So when we actually went to like what most people I would consider a standard budget hotel, quite often, that it was the lap of luxury for them. Um, so that was, but there was certainly some very, just literally rooms that were, a square and a couple of beds, and
That's
you
it.
know, it was quite funny when the girls start naming the cockroaches that you see scuttling across the floor, and they were brilliant. Oh, Dave's back. He scuttles off somewhere. Especially when you're staying, sort of maybe in the fringes of forests, or the Amazon, or somewhere like that. Yeah, so they were very matter of factly about it. So, but no, it was definitely for us. You know, it was price that was the main factor when we were booking our accommodation.
Good, good. So, and then New Zealand, and there was family welcoming you, and you got your stuff back, you had a house, or were you traveling still in New Zealand as well?
Again, the answer to that is both. So the whole reason for the move back to New Zealand was for family, or the word in Maori is whānau, which kind of is a sort of a broader concept of family. So we moved back to my hometown. My sister had recently also moved back from Auckland to Palmerston North. So we only have a very small family. So it was really an opportunity for us to experience what life so my girls could kind of get a grip on what it was like for me, and where I come from, and my family,
Hmm.
and their grandparents, to meet their grandparents as well, because there have been a couple of trips backwards and forwards, but it's only a week or two here and there, and there's only so much that you can do through a Zoom call, in terms of that. So that was the whole motivation.
Hmm.
So it was moving back to my hometown. It was re-engaging with friends, and particularly, as I say, family. Yeah, and we rented a house. It was still a couple of weeks or so, as it currently is now, until the container ship arrived with all of our stuff. So we were kind of Airbnb sort of accommodation for a couple of weeks, just waiting for our stuff to arrive, and then once it did, then, as I say,
Hmm.
we hit the afterburners, and rented a house in a kind of nice central location to family and schools and work,
Yeah,
and yeah, and then went for it. Yeah.
yeah. And your daughter started school, making friends. And
Yeah.
you're a teacher. You started to teach as well. Your wife is a teacher. I don't know.
Yes, so my wife is a primary school teacher,
Yeah.
and she. It was quite interesting. On our way through, we started applying for jobs, and it's quite a difficult thing to do. Unless you're actually on site, nobody's really interested. So she must have fired off, I don't know, at least a dozen applications, because Palmerston North, we were living, is quite a small city.
Yeah.
And I think she might have got two, replies of no, thank you, and everybody else would just no reply at all. So it was quite interesting. So when we enrolled our daughter into the local primary, sort of just behind where we were living, and the headmaster very, very quickly realised that my wife's CV had passed across his desk. It was quite interesting.
Employed
Uh,
her.
yeah, so as I say, my wife is a very experienced teacher, and of course, through conversation and talking about pedagogy and curriculums and stuff like that, he kind of twigged, and yeah, fetched her CV out of the circular filing cabinet, and and dusted it off, and yeah, literally within 4 or 5 hours of having a chat, she was employed. So that was absolutely fabulous. That was something new for us as well. So we'd always wondered, as I say, as Palmerston North's a very small town. So my youngest, Tamsin, and my wife Kirsten, they worked and went to the same school together. Kaylee went to, so in New Zealand, year 7 and 8, as it is in the UK system, is called intermediate, and that's a separate stage. So we have separate intermediate schools just for those 2 years. So she
Mhm.
went to a different school. It was
Mhm.
very difficult for me to get a job. difficult. And that was just down to my qualification. So my wife Kirsten, no problem at all, because she had an old-fashioned PGCE from a well-known university, whereas my entry through into teaching was via the school-centered initial teacher training courses, the SCIT,
Oh,
which, even though New Zealand was adopting as a method of training their teachers, they wouldn't accept it as a qualification. So it took me 6 or so months of letters, writing, MPs, Teachers Council, the whole works. So that was quite a long and tortuous process. I won't bore you with it, but it was very, very difficult for me to get a job. So I did cover teaching, relief teaching for the first year, and then eventually, when everything got sorted out, I managed to get a full-time job. So that was quite interesting. Actually, I'll follow on. I know I've talked for a while, but I'll follow on from that. What was actually really nice was doing cover teaching or relief teaching meant that you could walk in at sort of 8:30, 9 o'clock, walk out at 3 o'clock, and for me, what was really nice, having come from my previous job, where and this is one of the reasons we also left the UK. We were working 7 till 7. We were doing 12-hour days. Was not an uncommon thing. And then suddenly I had this opportunity where I could go to the shows, I could go to the songs and the meetings, and it was really nice to re-engage with my children, and education, and whatever it is that was doing. So that was a lovely side of things. But that also was very important in New Zealand. So I would say over the UK that you find that the ability to engage and do things together as a family, and including the education of your children, is a much more inclusive thing.
okay,
Yeah.
interesting. But anyway, you decided to come back. It was originally the plan, or did you thought you might stay there?
We always had an escape route. So it was never necessarily the intention to definitely come back. It was very much a case of let's see how it goes.
Hmm.
And we were thinking 2 to 3 years is a fair length of time in order for us to embed ourselves in the community, form friendships, reestablish ties, and
Hmm.
really you really understand what it was like to live in New Zealand. And but we always had the escape route, which is why we rented the house. So if we needed to, we always had the base here. um, and and as I say, the decision was going to be made after 2 to 3 years. If we were going to stay, then we probably would have liquidated our assets, and then made a permanent, stopped renting, and bought and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But we decided, as I say, after, well, it was a very, very difficult decision.
Why
We were
did you
set.
come back?
Oh, it's the girls in the end drove that decision.
Oh,
The education system in New Zealand traditionally has been one of the best in the world. But over the last sort of decade in particular, political changes have very much eroded the quality and the standard, certainly in terms of knowledge and curriculum in New Zealand. And the girls um, weren't they felt that they weren't getting the education that they needed
okay.
and
Or
wanted
you
to do.
were more thinking it. I
Um,
don't think. Yeah.
we were thinking it, and it still stands that if you're a capable, motivated student, you can still do very, very well in the New Zealand education system. You really can. But it's hard work, and you need to go out and find it, and do a lot of it yourself.
Yourself. Okay.
And what was quite interesting, as I say, uh, both my girls, in terms of academic ability, were, even after 2 years of really not a particularly strong or intense education, was still off the chart in almost all facets of reading and writing and mathematics. And my eldest in particular really loves school, loves being challenged, and felt that she wasn't getting that, and that's made the decision. We decided that
Hmm.
that
Coming
uh,
back.
it's the wisdom of the youth. She's maybe said the most. I'm encapsulating two ideas here, but she made a statement which was, you know, we need to go back to the UK for the education system in order for us to probably get the best education that we can, because
Hmm.
they didn't feel that they were going to get that in New Zealand.
Hmm.
And, you know, she said it very much feels like we're making the wrong decision. She said, you know, we're making the right decision. It'll be the right decision eventually. It
Yeah.
doesn't feel like the right decision now, but in the long term, it
You
will
could
be.
have gone maybe to Asia, to Singapore, where the education system is very good.
We could have, but we decided to come back to what, and
What
again,
you
I
knew
suppose
already.
what we
Yeah.
knew and what we trust, and
Yeah. 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 Understandable.
absolutely, we could have looked at sort of international schools, anywhere in the world, to be honest. But we've got family here. We've got a lot of, after we lived here for, as I say, the best part of quarter of a century. So the roots here were still very deep, and it
Mm.
was just the most easiest and the comfortable
Yeah.
for all of us involved.
But you didn't came straight away. You traveled the other part of the world back.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely. So we took the
we have to
opportunity.
be quick. We still have 10 minutes, but
Oh,
yeah. So how did you travel back? What countries did you see on your way back?
so it was South America and Latin America was the plan on the way back. Again, we followed the same plan or lack thereof as it was. So
Mhm.
we bought a ticket from a new route had just opened up with one of the Chinese airlines from Auckland to Buenos Aires.
Mhm.
And then we decided that we were going to fly out of Mexico. So we bought our ticket into South America. We bought our ticket from Mexico back to the UK,
Yeah.
and we had a couple of highlights that we wanted to hit on the way, and we just, as I say, did it spontaneously, made it up on the way. So we had a list. We, yeah, it's not until you're traveling sort of South America, particularly, the continent is just so huge. It's so big, and we had grand plans. I think we had 13 or 14 um, countries on our list, but we only ended up getting 9 done. As I say, for all the reasons that I've mentioned earlier. Yeah, so we flew into Argentina, into Buenos Aires. We did a day trip to Uruguay, so we kind of ticked that off the list, but again, didn't really do it justice. And then it was Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, Panama, Guatemala, Mexico, and then out. And again, we took 10 weeks, give or take a day or two, to do that as well.
You were on the Panama Channel, weren't you?
Oh, yeah, and actually, one of the questions, sort of that we ask, of the girls is, which were your favorite bits? And my youngest, I think she has aspirations to become an engineer. She absolutely loved the Panama Canal. So you go in a, sort of a mid-sized sort of little ferry type boat, and yeah, you go through the locks, and we had a massive ship, literally coming through with us as well. So. Yeah, she absolutely loved that, and the wildlife in Panama as well is something quite spectacular as well. She thoroughly enjoyed that. So yeah, that was why it was one of her favorite countries, I think.
Okay. So now back to boring but good education life here in the UK. Is your container back with everything?
No, we're still minimum baggage,
Okay.
which
Still
is
one little suitcase for everybody.
absolutely. So yeah, we had a little bit of our stuff left here, as I say, but we're pretty much still living out of. We've got 2 pairs of shorts and 3 or 4 shirts, and
But a
that's
lot
kind of
of
about it.
books I see in the background.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All the books went into storage, so they've come out. But yes, so yeah,
Yeah.
we're apparently our cruise ship is it's got been delayed already by about a week. It had to pull into Antwerp for some reason,
Mm,
but hopefully it arrives in the next 3 or 4 days. And then
okay.
goodness knows when from there we're going to get our container.
Oh, yeah.
I doubt we're going to get it before the term starts. Well, the term's already started
Yes, for some of already,
for
but it's not
yeah.
a
So
private school. Cool, Donald. Any other travels you want? No, not yet.
so no, so much. I think we're probably looking forward to revisiting a few haunts. You know, we very much love the south of France for our summer holidays. We
Okay,
certainly really enjoy the Greek, particularly the Greek islands, usually in October
yeah.
for a
Take it
sunset.
easy now.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, certainly there is a desire to go. You know, sort of Finland, Denmark, Sweden, up that
Ah,
sort of way. There's
Scandinavia.
very much
Mhm.
a desire.
Very nice. Yes.
Possibly North Africa,
Mm.
maybe Morocco and Egypt, and somewhere around there is again very much.
From the north to the south, I recommend. Okay, it was lovely to talk to you. Have a good time and welcome back in London, in the UK.
Thank you very much, Gabby. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Bye.
Cheerio.
Time is up, she is here, and they are here. I've got the world in my pocket. I've got the world in my pocket. And I like it. And I like it. The vibe is up, she is here, and they are here. I've got the world in my pocket. I've got the world in my pocket. I've got the world in my pocket.